You're welcome to this webinar organized by Wider Perspectives Limited. This is the fifth in the series, and we are glad you are able to join us. We are a management consulting firm helping businesses to strategically identify growth areas and harness them in order to achieve sustainability. Our focus for this year's webinar series is on strategies for business sustainability. Understanding how critical it is to keep your businesses a going concern, even in these uncertain times, we have been discussing topics pertinent to business survival, topics like cash flow management, innovation, and leveraging on technology, to mention but a few. My name is Adobe Ume, and I am the Team Lead Economic Analysis, Wider Perspectives Limited. I'll be your host today with my colleague, Oyekachi Udensi, the team lead of our Special Projects and Conferences Unit, as co-hosts. To ensure our time here is meaningful today, we will establish some housekeeping to guide us. We have the Q&A section on this app, and you can utilize the section to send in your questions while we discuss the topic for today. And we also have the chat room where you can send in your comments and your observation about this webinar. This is a learning forum, and we encourage participation. Please try as much as possible to participate, and you can send in your concerns or your questions to gain more knowledge about the subject topic for today. And also, we encourage you to listen actively, and we are also going to be streaming on our social media platforms. We have a live stream going on right now on our Facebook platform and also our YouTube platform. So if you're unable to join us on the Zoom app, you can utilize those platforms to also gain some knowledge from our discussion for today. And also to let you know that this session is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on our social media platforms. So you can refer to these recordings to get more knowledge on topic, not just this webinar, but on the previous webinars that we have had. And okay, so we will be launching a poll now to test your understanding of private equity funding. It's just going to take a few minutes of your time, and we ask that you give us feedback on this poll. The poll will be going up now on our screen, and kindly participate in, and send in your feedback. Thank you. Okay, the poll is still on. Please do well to send in your feedback so we could get some information about your knowledge on equity funding. Okay, the results are coming in slowly. Thank you. We're receiving your feedback. Thank you. Okay, I can see that we have more of executive present here for this discussion. Okay, that's good. And we can see that loans are like the mostly sought for with regards to business financing. Okay. Okay, oh, all right. There's also equity, that's fine. Okay, thank you so much for your feedback. We'll just post the polling results now. Okay, so we have the results on the screen. All right, so since we have more of executive in this discussion, okay, that's great. All right, so we can see that funding options used for businesses, mostly equity. Fine, that's fine. And we can see also next is loans, and then we have grants. Thank you. And okay, a lot are aware of private equity funding option. Oh, that's great. Okay. The results here shows that quite a number of persons have not been able to access private equity funding for their businesses. That's a major concern, and that will be addressed today. Okay, okay. Results also say that quite a number of persons here have not really tried accessing private equity funding for their businesses. Okay. And most of them are not sure that their businesses are prepared to access external funds at this moment. All right, thank you so much for the feedback on the poll. This really shows that you are at the right place, and the topic that we will be discussing today is going to be quite helpful to you in making decisions with regards to financing your business. So today, we are discussing a very important topic, growing your business through private equity. And our key discussion today is Mrs. Uwa Osaobo. She is the head corporate development at Capital Alliance Nigeria, a member of the African Capital Alliance, ACA Group, an investment management firm with investments in sub-Saharan Africa. She joined the firm in 2013 and facilitates its strategy definition and implementation, human resource development, and also external relations. At various times in her career, she has worked as a lawyer, as a banker, and as a management consultant. In the latter phase, she served as the CEO of Mistral, a research, strategy, and leadership development consulting firm, for 8 years up until 2012. Uwa has over the years worked with and consulted for various corporations and government agencies. She is personally committed to principles of enduring individual and organizational effectiveness and how to transition these to the larger society. She sits on the boards of the ACA Foundation, the Impact Investing Foundation of Nigeria, the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance, and the American Business Council. She is also a fellow of the African Leadership Initiative West Africa, ALIWA, a chapter of the Aspen Leadership Global Network. Welcome, Mrs. Uwa Osaobo. We are glad to have you on here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay, so business financing is very critical for achieving growth and sustainability in businesses. It is the core of every business organization, whether you want to start a business or expand an existing one. According to the World Bank Group, entrepreneurs are the most significant contributors to developing economies, especially in areas of employment. However, they enjoy less access to external finance and face higher transactions with high risk. Debt financing is the common type of financing, especially in this part of the world where loans are mostly sought for. However, a significant number of businesses are unable to access these loans because they cannot meet up with all necessary requirements. In growing, we are going to be discussing growing your business through private equity. And our discussant is Mrs. Uwa Osa Obo, a well-experienced investment consultant in Nigeria. You may share your questions using the Q&A, and if you are...
Let me share a slide, right?
Okay, please
Because I think it will provide a handle for your participants at the minimum. But I'll speak, as I feel necessary. I think private equity can be looked at in three categories. You have venture capitalists or venture capital. You have what is then called the traditional PE, which is when you invest in growth capital, or very common abroad is LBOs, leverage buyouts, including venture capital is PE. So after this first question, when I refer to PE, I'm going to be referring more to growth and probably LBOs, though LBOs are not common in this part of the world. But I felt that in taking the first question, it would be nice to explain both VCs, PE together, and so you can see what the marriage of these two, fund structures are when you look at the investment landscape. So I think to said, all businesses and companies at some point in time need additional capital, unless your business is dying. Once you go through that S cycle, you're either, growing or you're reinventing yourself. And at each of these stages, you do need capital. Now, not many businesses can access what you call access capital from the more formal, established, routes. For instance, as you rightly said, Ada, many SMEs won't be able to access banking capital. Why? Because they don't have the structures that will convince the banks that their money won't be put at risk. Because by nature, banks really don't have at-risk capital. They are an intermediary. They take money from people. They want to make a bit of money, by the side, but return the money back to the people when they ask. So many enterprising, creative people may find it difficult to access, debt, or even, the capital market with all its strictures and requirements may be difficult as well for people. And this is why private equity, as we know it to be, has become such a significant force for transformation and good. And I'll say it's probably started in the last half a century in the US, becoming a formal, categorization or category of financing. Now, talking a bit about private equity, not many people know, the details about this industry. So I'm going to kind of be granular, and hopefully there are, areas that are still hazy. If we have time for Q&A later on, we can take those. But private equity is at-risk funds. People who invest and give their money to private equity funds know that part of that money may not come back because it's at risk. And that is why, if you look at the SEC regulations, private equity funds will not be allowed to raise money from people like you and me, so the lawyer of the street. No, you raise money largely from what you call institutional investors, who are sophisticated enough to understand the nature of the industry. Now, when I said some money may not be returned, note that I didn't say the fund will be unprofitable. When a fund is raised to maybe $100 million, it probably will invest in 12, 13 businesses. And one or two may not work, but the 10 that work will more than make up for the loss. And so the ideal scenario for a private equity fund is to take $100 million, and I will use dollars more than I'll use naira because it is an international sector, and invest it in these 10, 13 businesses and harvest from those businesses. One or two maybe, average, some may just return the principal. But from those that do very well, be able to harvest, let's say, 350 million. That is the ideal scenario. So a private equity fund that does not harvest profitably literally goes out of business immediately. Because those institutional investors, when you come back to them, they'll say, what did you do with what we gave to you the last time? Now, these funds are typically close-ended and for a particular duration. And right now, close-ended means that once you stop fundraising, nobody else can come in. So a private equity firm will decide, I'm going to raise $50 million for my next fund. And they'll go into the market to raise this fund. And by the time they get investors that will give them 50 million, they close the gate. So it's close-ended. You can't keep, like mutual fund, you can't keep coming in and out, as you will. And it's usually for a particular duration, a duration of 10 years. We say 10 plus 2, because at times there's an extension that may be required, particularly if certain businesses are not ready for harvesting. A fund will typically have what you call a clear investment strategy. So you have private equity funds that just invest in technology. You have private equity funds that will say we'll invest in Nigeria and nowhere else, or in Africa and nowhere else. So when you go to people, these sophisticated investors, and you say, I'm a PE firm, I'm raising a fund, they'll ask you, what's your investment strategy? And you must be faithful to that strategy. So if a firm says, oh, we will invest in West Africa, and you begin to invest in North Africa, your investors can take you to court. They can divest from your fund and take you to court as a result of that. So there's a lot of negotiation and consideration before you go raising, a fund. And it is because of that we say it ends up being a blind pool. Because once you let your investor know, this is what I will do with this money, this is where this money will go. If the investor, in the way they are coming up with their own portfolio of investments, is very happy with that strategy, they will let you run. So we say it's a blind pool in the sense that for every investment you make, you don't need to go back to the person who gave you money to say, I want to invest in ABC or in CDE. Can I know? You are the professional, you go ahead and invest. Now, like I said earlier, when you do exit, returns are expected. And because people recognize that this is riskier than your average, investing in the Nigerian Stock Exchange or on NASDAQ in the US or, S&P, the New York Stock Exchange. The reason why they give you this money is that when you return this money to them, they get what they call an alpha return. Alpha is any return above what you get from normal investment instruments, So if when the money market in Nigeria was, bonds were going for 10% or 12% or 30% last year, if I had a Naira fund in PE, what I would return to my investor must be, so your typical, stock will say I must beat, what I'll get from the money market. So maybe that you make 18% there. But the private equity return must be well above that for people to justify the risk they are taking in putting in the funds. So it's very important that you understand that as you approach PE funds, they are also obligated to other people. And that's what many people don't understand, that behind a PE fund is an entire universe of investors and a universe of contractual terms that a PE fund must abide with or try to meet. PE funds are usually managed by what we call a fund manager. And how do they make their money? They make their money by what we call management fees. So they earn a tiny percentage on the monies they are given to invest. But the reason why the sector has been associated with a lot of success is when a PE fund harvests successfully, they are entitled to what you call carry, which is a portion of the profit that is made. So you find that PE investors do not work for the management fee because largely it pays salaries, pays for light. But if they can harvest significant profits and yield, then they take a share of profits. And like I said earlier, when a PE fund does not successfully exit, It's a counting clock after that, because the likelihood of you being able to raise another fund it's not likely, So just providing some context there. Now I'm going to go to the next slide, and here I'm going to start talking a bit about venture capital vis-a-vis PE. What are the similarities between a private equity fund and a VC? So in Nigeria today, you have many VCs, Eco VC, but you have private equity funds like, what ACA has, Capital Alliance Nigeria. What's the difference? There are some similarities, obviously. Like I said, they are both private capital. This is not investing in companies that are in the public domain. So public equity will be, investing in quoted companies, raising funds, from through IPOs. Private equity is private capital, and it has nothing to do with any of those platforms or instruments. So that is one clear similarity you have between the private equity industry and the VC industry. Another similarity is that both you will consider to be long-term capital. Today, if you went to a bank for debt, the likelihood of getting a loan for 5 years, probably with a moratorium of 4 years, is totally out of the question. You may get a 6-month moratorium, but you need to start paying back almost immediately. With both VC and private equity funds, you do have the advantage of a number of years where, and the investors will call this a J curve, because for a number of years, the investor doesn't expect anything. But he does expect that after 3, 4, 5 years, you start paying dividends. And ultimately, at the time of exiting, harvesting, they can get their principal back. And the typical life cycle, like I said, will be about 10 years. Less than 10 years, obviously, because you invest at various points in time. So this private equity fund will be raised, and let's say a fund was raised in January 2020, in spite of COVID. You probably have 3 or 4 years within which to invest. And the investors will say, if you don't invest within those 3, 4, 5 years, by the 6th year, you are not allowed to invest anymore. Because the likelihood of you being able to invest, turn around a company and make money is not likely. So we expect you to start harvesting as from the 6th year. And that is when the J curve, so it's typically like this, you don't earn anything as an investor, but as from the 5th, 6th year, some of your money begins to come back, either as yield, dividends, and ultimately, the capital, is returned. But there are some major differences as well between VCs and private equity. Venture capitalists focus on what you call startups, and startups could be at various stages. A startup could be somebody who just has a bright idea, and that idea is just written on a sheet of paper, and there's nothing beyond that. And you could go to a VC and say, you know what, I have this bright idea, and you are so compelling, and the idea is so attractive that a VC will say, we'll put money behind it. We'll help you even fund proof of concept. We'll help you do a feasibility study, So you have early stage VCs. Then you have VCs that, they don't want early stage. They want to come in when the concept has been proven. And they will come in at a stage that you call commercialization, when you now have a proven concept that the market wants, but what you now need to do is fund it in such a way that you can now operationalize it, hire staff, hire a factory, get an office, whatever it is you need to do. And then you have late stage VCs who say, listen, we're not early stage, concept has been proved. We are not commercialization either. The market has shown that it likes what you do. So we'll come in when you are ready to scale up a bit. When you want to open 2 factories, or you want to move from Lagos to Ibadan or Kano, at that point in time, we'll come in and help you scale up. And this is where you begin to see a marriage between VCs and PE, because late stage VCs play in the market as some PE companies do, PE companies with the smaller funds. So there you begin to see an overlap, because like I said earlier, PE usually is for growth and leverage buyout. So scaling up is very similar to what, but let's assume that scaling up was for VCs. So a VC will come in and say, listen, we'll help you now, scale out, what you currently have. So that's the VC, sector for you. I did talk earlier. I said with PE funds, we do expect that if you invested in 10 companies, 1 or 2 may not do that well, but most have to do well for you to make a return. The reason why the VC space is so much more risky, in fact, it's a typical VC in Silicon Valley, the tech startups there will say that probably out of every 10, only 1 or 2 will succeed. Well, that one that succeeds usually is astronomical. So VCs put a bit of money, never quite at the same size as private equity, just a bit to get you going. Like I said, it's to help you prove concept. It's to help you rent a factory. It's to help you probably set up offices elsewhere. So it's reasonably small compared to what a PE fund will eventually provide. So what happens is that VC funds, when they exit, they literally exit to hand over, so at the point of their exit, that's the point that PE comes in. And PE comes in with what you call the big guns, So a PE firm will look at a company that has done well in Lagos and in Kano and say, why can't we take this to East and West Africa? Right now you're exporting to Ghana. What's the volume? It's okay, you know what? We will dominate this entire region, and we'll work with you in doing it. We have partners in each of those countries and we'll introduce you to them. So that entrepreneur suddenly sees that an idea that was just, a cottage industry 3 years ago has received some visibility, but not too large in the last 2 years, suddenly becomes a dominant business. And that's where growth equity comes in. So there's a handshake between what you call VC and PE funds, in spite of the fact that they are all what you call private capital, private equity. So, I mean, I have a bullet point, the 5th there, and I thought it was important to talk about it because when an entrepreneur has an idea, he asks himself, should I just jump straight and go to a VC? Maybe not. Even prior to VCs, there are other sources of capital that are also private, in their nature. So you have friends and family, where those your friends, informal relations, who trust in you, give you some money. Ahead or beyond friends and family, you then have what you call angel investors. And angel investors typically will be affluent individuals, people probably who have done very well in their careers and feel that they can help nurture young businesses driven by what they'll call very enterprising, young people. So, and probably have a bit of money. So you call them angel investors. And it's within that group of the angels, you probably have incubators as well. You have accelerators. There's even a group of VCs now you call corporate VCs. And I'll give you an example. I know Google, I was speaking to a gentleman about 2 years ago who Google hired to help set up their Google venture, And for Google, theirs is to look for interesting IT ideas, maybe in Nigeria or in, Ghana, and say, fund these ideas. And maybe when these ideas do well, we can even invest in them and ultimately buy up the idea or buy the company or pay for, the rights, the intellectual property rights or something. So those are called, corporate VCs, and typically they don't invest for money. They invest for strategic reasons, either to protect themselves or to ensure that they are accessing the next wave of growth through the innovation that is going on in that environment. So you have all kinds of sources of funds, starting with friends and family, up until when you get to PE funds. And so for anybody with a vision or a drive to grow their business, clearly this is something, to think about. And now, so I will now transition now to, I think this is the final, just in case you're wondering when I will close out on this question, I probably think I have another slide or two. And the reason I want to spend a lot of time here is laying this foundation will help with the understanding of the subsequent questions, right? So in what ways does private equity catalyze growth, in business? Frankly, this is an industry I'm extremely excited about. it brings a lot of things together. It brings capital, it brings knowledge, it brings access to technology, the kinds of resources that on your own you may not have been, because these investors are so sophisticated and they work within a sophisticated network. You can access things that on your own you may not even have known of. I remember a factory we invested in, and when we walked through that factory, in terms of the tools that were being used, we knew that efficiencies, just don't even establish 2 or 3 more factories. Just look at some of the pieces of equipment you have there and change them, and you'll see what that could do in terms of turnover, and I think we arranged for the sponsor, the entrepreneur, to visit some countries in Europe, and it was mind-blowing for him, So definitely PE does catalyze the growth of companies. And personally, I think that when it is properly done, it could be a transforming agency, an agency for transformation. But again, the caveat is when it's properly done. And I know a few of the other questions we'll take will address how it can be properly done. So, like I said earlier, it's patient capital. You must understand that when a PE fund invests with you, people have said, oh, they'll take my business. Oh, they are too demanding. But I have explained earlier that they have made covenants and commitments to other people. Yeah. And they have told people, though our investments are risky, we will make very constructive choices and we'll be very prudent in the way we deal with risk. So when they invest, they know that they are making risky choices, but high risk, high reward, and that's the nature of the game. So it's very important that entrepreneurs also see this other side of the coin. But the beauty is this: when you have a private equity fund that meets with the right sponsor and they appreciate what both bring to the table, it is synergistic. It's almost magical. I put ABC, at the bottom of the slide there because I before I joined the firm I work with, I remember, they were invested here, and I said this, but Frank Nagy himself has said this in so many fora, so I'm not, saying something he hasn't said. I was coming to work one day and I was listening to an entrepreneurship program by Fidelity Bank. I don't know if they still have it, in the mornings, and he was being, interviewed. And I was in the car listening to this man praising the firm I worked with to the highest heavens. How they moved with him along the coast of West Africa. Things he may have been concerned or afraid to do by himself, they gave him the humph, the confidence to do it. And he mentioned some of my colleagues. I mean, it was so synergistic that when we exited the business, he insisted, the chairman of the business was a colleague of mine, even though the fund was no longer in his business. So you can have very synergistic relationships. And then what happens is that you then have a partner of choice in tackling everything you need to tackle. The other thing they do is that a private equity firm, because of its sophistication, will help build management capacity. We've gone into firms where we know that the startup management team won't be the team to take the organization to the next level. But it's very difficult for the young entrepreneur to make those calls. Why? Because of loyalty, the fact that these people were with him right from the beginning. Now, you don't have to sack them. That's not the idea. But the idea is that you need to strengthen capacity. So it can be through training, it can be through building out a team, or it can be through getting, somebody more senior, if, there's humility in the mix. The key is if all of our eyes are on the ball and we know that if this business succeeds, we all will succeed, then people at times are willing to, accommodate such inconvenience if they have to. The other thing that a private equity firm will do is that it will professionalize, your business. And when you talk about organizational development, how are KPIs set? How are performance reviews done? Do we have a performance cycle that we are faithful to? How often do we review our strategic assumptions? How often do we do a market survey? Things that the entrepreneur has kind of used gut feel to, navigate through. What a private equity firm does is that it institutionalizes this, because If a sponsor says it's me and it's what my hunch and my feeling, then our organization will always remain small, no matter how successful. But if scale is what you want, and you want scale with standardization, not scale that when it's far from the home office, funny things begin to happen, then institutionalizing how you develop your organization becomes critical. Governance, strengthening and restructuring the board. A private equity firm will insist on independence being on the board. It also will have some seats. And some CEOs don't like accountability because the business is theirs. But when you have a private equity firm, it will insist on accountability even from the CEO, and it will be better for the entire system as a whole. Value creation, initiatives, they will drive all kinds of ideas. Like I talked about the gentleman we sent to Europe to look at how he could improve his factory. And they provide active oversight of management to ensure that good managers don't leave and bad managers don't stay. So and also provide room for people to use them as a sounding board for ideas and things like that. And ultimately, every owner of a business one day wants to leave his business, either leave it for his children or maybe make a bit of money from the 20, 30 years of work he has done. Private equity funds are experts at fundraising and can provide exit channels for an entrepreneur who wants to cash out. So I think, I don't know if let me see if there's anything here I think will be worth emphasizing for now. What I'll just say is, don't seek PE funding if what you want is just funding. If money is what you want, look for debt, look for, friends and family, look for less structured funds. Because indeed, a PE fund will demand certain things of you. But those things are the things that will allow you to become a big player, a big, successful and sustainable player. They walk you through that journey. But if all you want is, I need, the X amount of money, and, don't ask me what I'm going to use it for. Once you give me, it's mine, then PE funding is not for you for sure. So I think, let me see what the next slide is. So yeah, I think I have answered your first question.
Okay, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. That was very, really insightful. One good thing I picked from there was that that PE does not just invest the funds; they also work with you through the process. So it's not just throwing in some money and then leaving you to work the whole thing out and figure it out yourself. And the fact that PE also facilitates professionalism in businesses and helps promote organizational development. That's a really very strong point. And that could encourage businesses to maybe go for PE funding. And while you're trying to make that decision, one other thing she said is that if what you just need is the money, then maybe PE may not be the right choice for you. But if you need that that additional professionalism and that growth in your business, then maybe you could consider PE funding for your business. Thank you very much, ma'am, for that knowledge that you have given to us. Now, the next question would ask, in Nigeria here, we're so concerned about control of our businesses. So most times when people hear, okay, private equity investors trying to put in some money into your business and then you give them some stake in your business, they kind of like get scared because it's my business, I've been running this business. So how would you address this concern? Because it's really from our own experience, trying to get people to embrace PE. It's been the feedback that we've been getting. So how would you address this concern, ma'am?
Yes, let me start by saying, first of all, private equity, like I said earlier, can be growth. So I'm no longer talking about VCs now. Okay, now let's focus on that portion of private equity that is truly PE in terms of, how it's traditionally defined. You have growth equity and you have leverage buyouts. You can have what is called control buyouts as well. So let me explain. Growth equity is usually given to a business that has shown a very, attractive trend, and the outlook really looks, good. And what you want is the kind of capital that can actually allow you truly now dominate, truly optimize. Typically, growth capital won't provide an exit route for the sponsor. So somebody is not going to say, I need growth capital, but 50% of it is to cash out so I can go and sleep in my village. Well, no, growth equity, usually everything goes into the business. Because usually at that stage, the entrepreneur is still very active. One of the things I didn't say for VCs, and which is very similar to growth equity, is that the fund usually doesn't ask for a majority stake in a VC firm. It doesn't ask for majority in a VC investment. The entrepreneur gets the majority because the entrepreneur must be motivated to stay in and keep working. I mean, you can't work at times and sleep for 5 hours a day and say, I'm doing it for other people. What's the use? It's your idea, and you must know that it's your business. The key is they know that when they are cashing out, you would have grown this thing to be so attractive that whoever buys in at that point in time understands that he's buying for sweat equity and everything, and they'll pay a significant amount of money at times at that point in time, and everybody will walk away quite happy. The same thing for growth equity. It's very rare in private equity for a growth fund to insist on majority. So the sponsor typically continues to have majority, even if it's just 49-51. And it's very important to say that. Now, there are times when a sponsor will say, you know what, I'm 60 years old, this business I started it 15 years ago, but it has a real future. And, I would like you to take, control because I'm getting old. I need somebody to professionalize the firm. Even though I have people in my management team, I need real, hands-on, support. So why don't you do what we call a control buyout, where I will still have equity because I've worked for 15 years. So I'm happy with 40% equity, but you come and now take this business to the next stage, and that's what you call a control buyout. But not many entrepreneurs want that or are ready for that. So it's not often it happens. So this fear that people typically have that the private equity firm will come and take control, it is not quite so. I'll explain why the fear is there. But growth equity largely is not about control. It's usually about a significant majority, 40%, 35% in the business. But tied to that, like I said, the private equity fund has covenants, and it must also protect itself because it is not the majority, owner or holder of stock. How can it with 35 or 40% protect itself? It will insist on certain chairs on the board, all right? It will insist not just on certain chairs on the board, but it will insist on certain voting rights. For instance, so it may say, listen, any decision that will say people can come in and buy us out before 3 years must have my consent. So you can't sell this business without my consent. And they are well in their, it's well within they are well justified to ask for such protections. So you find out that some of those voting rights and covenants that are made at the beginning of the relationship are to protect them. Another way, and this is now the key one, in which you're going to ask me about preference shares later, but let me talk about it earlier, is let's say a business needs $30 million. They're building a factory, whatnot. But the valuation of this business is 60 million, which means that $30 million will give the private equity firm 50% of the firm, or even slightly more, maybe, depending, on actual valuation. The negotiation may go this way. You know what? Out of this 30 million, 15 million will go in as equity, which will give us 30% or thereabouts of your company. But the other 15% will make it some kind of quasi-equity, a preference share, some form of debt, with a coupon rate. So we don't own a majority of your business, but yet you have access to the $30 million because maybe no bank is willing to give you. In fact, maybe part of that money is even to help pay some of the banks who have been on your neck. And because you are paying them interest, the interest burden is so high that you're unable to, garner retained earnings for constructive growth. So part of that 30 million could be pay this and pay this off, and out of the meantime, you do that. So, but we're okay with 30% equity. You take the other portion as some form of quasi equity or debt and pay us a rate every year. However, if at any point in time you fail to do X, Y, Z, there are clauses that could trigger that debt instrument and convert it into equity. So if you are to breach covenants that we consider critical, if you are to take out money from the business without telling us, and you use it for things that represent strategy drift, that really don't add value to this business, guess what? That could be a trigger. And that thing that was not equity, it will trigger it and will convert it into, equity. Or, our fund is 10 years. We are already near 5 years. So we need to be able to exit by the 3rd year. But are you prepared to run the company at this rate and grow at this pace? The person will say yes. If by the 4th year, we now see that you're not growing much and things are not happening, meanwhile, we want to exit and you are presenting a roadblock. Remember, we have big institutional investors we need to return their money to. So you can't just take the money and say to hell with you. We may say, no, that's a trigger incident. So again, it converts to equity. So at that point in time, what was 30% stakeholding could now become, 50 something. And at that point in time, they then will then have control. But control in that case was usually as a result of some form of default, or what I'll call a violation of what you may consider critical terms and covenants. And I can also assure you that no entrepreneur will sign such a covenant if they don't think it's reasonable. In other words, at the time you entered, if somebody said, if you do this way, the person will say, for you to say, yes, I'll sign, it's supposed you know that, if I were in this other person's shoes, that's what I would also expect. Whatever happens at that point in time is that this entrepreneur then begins to cry. How people may want to take his company from him, and the private equity firm is crying to his investors to say, please give us some time. We'll ensure you get your money back. We didn't waste your money. We didn't, invest irresponsibly. So that is where at times this fear that, if I go to private equity, one day they may take my business. What I will say is that when a sponsor, an entrepreneur is open, is open, and engages and is in constant communication and is truly transparent, even some of these trigger events don't happen, even when things go all right or things go badly, because the private equity firm can see that they are in alignment with this person. And what they'll do is that together they will dig themselves out of the hole, But usually the fear of a private equity firm will be dealing with a rogue sponsor, somebody who just wanted the money and after the money doesn't want to pick their phone calls anymore. Somebody who does insider deals. So he sets up the company, but all the cars that are bought is bought through the car mart owned by his brother or his wife. All the computers that are supplied, the people who do driving belong to an agency that belongs to his sister. And you can see, I've been in a situation where the cost, per unit cost of what you call related party dealings was significantly higher than the market rate. And so we were fighting with the business that revenues were good, but profits was bad. So EBITDA was, constrained. And you could just see all the leakages going on. And that's what will trigger, like I said, that becomes a trigger event. Or you could have people who just become, renegades, people who, once you give money to them, they begin to buy up all kinds of assets and they don't even come to you to say, should I acquire this company? Should I merge? It's my company, I will do what I want with it. Actually, the private equity firm will say, no, this is a partnership of sorts. We're just here for 10 years. or we are in partnership and we deserve to be carried along. Or at times, another concern will be, let's say it's an IT company and the star of the company is the sponsor. He is the one with the intellectual capacity and the creativity. There could be a clause that says, a key man risk clause that says, if anything should happen to this man, we're not going to risk that other third parties come in and try and solve the situation or bring sanity. We want to come in at that point in time and see what we can do so that we don't lose our investment. So you can see that just as entrepreneurs fear, so do PE firms fear. In fact, the fear is so much at times. When I use the word fear, obviously, maybe that's not the right word, but the concern could be so much at times that when you're dealing with an entrepreneur, some PE firms have gone as far as doing psychometric testing. What is the personality of this person? Can he stay the long haul? Is he the kind of person that follows through on his word? Because you like the entrepreneurial fervor, but obviously, as you know, the entrepreneurial fervor also at times results in a lot of bullish instincts and tendencies, which don't work well in a PE, relationship. So you're going to ask me later, what should you do if you want PE funds? And begin to highlight some of those things. You must be true to your word. You must know why you want the funds and that you truly want a partner that you can work with. Some of the things I put at the lower bullet point are some of the things that typical, not just PE funds, VCs, most financial investors will do to protect themselves. And if you violate any of those things, these are covenants that they will, use in protecting themselves. But I think I've answered your question.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Okay, that was a very good one. So entrepreneurs do not need to have that fear of losing control, because you have a covenant that is there to protect you through the relationship. Thank you very much for that, for addressing this concern. If you're just joining us from on our social media platforms on Facebook and on YouTube, we are discussing growing your business through private equity. And our key discussion today is Mrs. Uwa Osa Opo, and she is a well-experienced investment consultant in Nigeria. If you have some questions for her, you can use the comment section on our social media platforms and send in your question. For those that are with us here on the Zoom app, kindly use the Q&A platform to send in your questions. So we already have a question here. Okay, that says, ma'am, I think that refers to your the previous slide when you were discussing angel investors. So the question reads, under the angel investors, the category is accelerators and what, please? I think there were some categories that you mentioned.
Oh, okay. No, so in fact, angel investors, like I said, are affluent individuals who, can mentor and give you some money at that startup stage. Also in that category, and so angel investors may come in different forms. You could have people who are what you call incubators, so let me give an example. I know an incubator somewhere in Ikeja in Lagos here, who provides office space to people who have provided concepts that he or she finds interesting. So what they are telling you is, you know what, for 18 months, CAC, there's light, somebody will help you, there's printer, just work on this concept. Instead of paying me rent, that money you should have paid me, see it as my investment in you. So they incubate, many businesses, of which some end up being able to attract VC funds, You could also have what we call accelerators. Accelerators will be those who go beyond just providing what you call a convenient environment. They actually then give you some money as, like catalytic funding. Okay, that prototype, let's build it and see if it works. How much do you need to build it? I'm going to need $50,000. Okay, an accelerator will give you that $50,000. They may not invest in marketing or anything, but theirs could be, let's make sure. So in other words, they accelerate the process. And once you've shown that that prototype works, then you can go to a VC and say, I've gone beyond proof of concept. In fact, look at my prototype. This machine is able to produce, maybe the average machine can produce plastic bottles at 50 per minute. Mine easily can do it at 150 per minute. And let me show you, and then they say, okay. So the accelerator has helped you accelerate your speed to market in that sense.
All right, thank you very much, Ma. So the accelerators and the incubators, is that?
And then those who just give you money, as
Okay.
and mentor you.
Thank you very much, Ma. Moving forward, we have the, businesses most times, like the feedback we got from the poll, a lot of majority of the response received said that they are not sure if they should go into or what to do, to attract private equity financiers to their businesses. So could you please just give us some information or, on how businesses can position themselves to be able to attract private equity? So what do investors actually look out for in these businesses that will make them take that decision to invest in the business?
Okay. Remember that I said that private equity usually comes in for young but fairly mature businesses. Yeah. The VC, when it comes in, doesn't expect to see a team of management team. It probably doesn't, obviously, it doesn't expect to see audited accounts. But when a P fund, is looking at you, you must be at that stage of, some, maturity, some threshold. And so what a P firm will be looking at is your positioning, in your industry. Is there room for growth? If you're able to tell a PE fund, you know what, I do cables. I'm number 3 in the market, but my cables sell faster than other people's own. The problem is I'm not able to produce enough. So my market is solely in Lagos. Meanwhile, in Aba, they're asking for me. In Kano, they're asking for me. In Maiduguri, they're asking for me. So when they look at your positioning, they will say, you know what? Clearly, if we give you the money you need, there's room for growth. It's not saturated. A firm that is really at the cash cow stage where the room for growth is not much won't be interesting to a PE fund for the reasons I said. The PE fund must invest reasonably low. The amount may seem much, but for it's reasonably small so that it's able to sell your business to somebody who is then willing to pay something much higher. So a company that is already fully mature won't be interesting to a PE fund because they'll say, what value do we add? How do we get capital appreciation? So it's very important that you show them, what that will be. Transparency, well-kept records, and good operating governance. If we come to you and we see that you're the kind of company that doesn't like paying taxes, a bell will begin to ring. Because the truth is, the minute we invest in you, and then the government publishes 2 years later, companies that don't pay taxes in Nigeria, and your name appears, guess what is happening with my investors in the US and in the UK, where regulation is so strong? Remember what happened to Nike, when they found out that the factory they were using for, the laborers who were sewing Nike shoes, poorly air conditioned, they were like sardines kept, and Nike suffered huge diminution in its capital, in its valuation as a result of that. So we like businesses that are clean, records are well kept, nothing is hidden. You don't come and say, we have 3 accounts, Sha. These are the 3. When I walk out of there, I'll say, but if he has a 4th and a 5th, he hasn't shown me. You want to show that you are the kind of company that embraces positive values, and just by talking to your staff, people can tell the values of an organization and the culture. We want to see that no matter how small it may be, that you have a motivated and competent management team. They maybe need to round out the team. Maybe you need a chief marketing officer or a better CFO, or or a COO. It doesn't matter. But the people on the ground show that they are hungry. If not, it will now be at the call of the P firm to change all your management. And that means that J curve I talked about earlier will be a very extended one. Because by the time we change your management, they will now learn the business, learn all the nooks and the crannies. It will take probably another 5 years before we can expect any money. And we don't want that. We want a credible sponsor, somebody that we feel is as hungry for the vision we are working towards, So somebody who won't siphon funds into other things because he's totally committed to creating a great business, And like I said earlier, I won't repeat it, a business, with potential for alpha returns. We'll also be looking at the sector. If the sector is the kind of sector that we don't think is, in other words, the sector may be doing well today, but what's the outlook for that sector? I mean, what COVID has done is just to, throw question marks everywhere. One of the sectors today that I am wondering how people in that space are coping are, event managers who are not digitally competent. So if your event management was just to put chairs and tables, but you didn't know how to do Zoom video for events and all of that, and guess what? That Zoom video, one man is just doing it in his apartment somewhere, you don't need a team for that. So a sector maybe seem to be booming and everybody's going in, but what a private equity firm will do is they will, play the devil's advocate and they will question your value proposition just to make sure that, they can at least, even if they're still going, they will then put hedging strategies in place. They will look at the local, regulatory and macro trends. They will look at the price you want to sell for. So we feel we need to come in for $20 million. You say it has to be 50. They may walk away because at times entrepreneurs, they could, they could overestimate, the value of their businesses. And also, finally, a good point, the tenor of the investment vis-a-vis the fund cycle. About early last year, an entrepreneur who was in the agri space doing very, very well approached us. I particularly liked them. I thought that they were doing great work and they had a lot of anecdotes and case studies. But when we looked at the business closely, we saw that the money that we're asking for, harvesting those funds will take us a minimum of 5 to 6 years. And because the fund we were investing at that point in time was already in its 4th year, we said we can't take that risk. So if they had met us when the fund was in its 1st year and we had 9 years to go, I'm very sure it would have worked out. But because we only met them towards the end of our investment period, we knew that the possibility of capital appreciation to the degree we'll expect will be very low within the time span we had, left. So we didn't parley with them. We didn't engage. So I think the overriding consideration for a PE firm is trust. Can I trust this person? Another overriding consideration is the business proposition itself. Is this a business I think has a lot of juice left in it? Can I add value to it? And I think if those two things are answered in the positive, and then there's agreement on strategy, so a PE firm will say, you've told us everything, but now let's paint a possible strategic picture for you. We want you to dominate West Africa. And the guy says, no, I'm not interested in dominating West Africa. Instead, I want to dominate the East. I want to just remain in Nigeria. Obviously, then there's a misalignment. Maybe we believe that the wealth in the East, relative to the wealth in dominating the whole of West Africa, that one is more attractive to us. So the strategy alignment also must be there in terms of that vision that we both paint. And once that there's alignment there, then I think a handshake is then quite possible.
Thank you very much, ma'am. That's really enlightening. Looking at the other side of the coin, you just talked about how businesses have to position themselves to be able to attract private equity. Now, when making that decision on which private equity investor to choose or get into a relationship with, what tips can you give businesses to guide them in that decision making?
Well, the first, and that's what I've put in bold here, is track record. You know, don't listen to just what people say. Watch what they do. Go to people they have, if you're dealing with a fund that has had previous funds, go to people they have invested in before. So you have an idea of what their value proposition is. So I think track record is important, because what is good for the goose may not be good for the gander, and vice versa. A private equity fund could be an activist fund, a fund, I use the word activist, not as in troublemaking, but they are very active and very hands-on. You may be the kind of sponsor that, listen, we've agreed what we want to do. Let me do it. I don't need you on visiting me every week, or I don't need late night calls when you and I are brainstorming into the night. He just wants to work on his own. If you're that kind of entrepreneur, you don't go for a fund where you know that the style is to be more hands-on. There's nothing wrong with what you are or what they are. It's just that it won't meet. So you go for maybe funds that are a bit more passive, funds that are stronger in terms of the financial value addition than the operational value addition. So a fund that can help you restructure your balance sheet, take out some of your debt, or leave you alone to do most of your operating. So so there's no one size fits all. It's what you want. I think that matters. Obviously, it stands to reason. Like I told you, a PA fund will have a strategy in terms of how they want to invest. You must be sure that your business fits into that strategy. You must understand the kind of returns they want. There are some PE funds that are extremely bullish and have promised their investors will give you 4 times your money back. Others have said we'll give you 2.5. Now, the one that says 4 times your money back, believe me, he's going to be all over you. And he's going to be insisting that you take very, very decisive, at times fairly speedy, decisions in terms of growth. And if you are an entrepreneur who operates that way, you're always, on the adrenaline drive, then you don't have a problem with it. But you tell them, don't worry, it's not even 4 you're going to be returning, to be 5, because by the time I'm done, I'm going to automate this business. We are going to move from 1 product into 6 product, lanes, and it's 5. Don't worry. And you both of you are happy. You are both on adrenaline, and you ride it through. But if somebody wants something a bit more paced, but strong and high value, he may say, what? It's 2.5, and this is how we think you can get it. This is fine. I think I can stomach this. So you need culture and values. Are important. In other words, P funds, by the way, tend to be very, very, and I'll refer to this later, because the industry is not regulated in terms of what you may call government regulation. The internal regulation with the industry is so strong that you hardly find P funds that are rogue, in the sense that the people will do bad. Because when you do bad, the industry will shut you out immediately. So when I say test for culture and values, the industry punishes PE funds that do not reflect best practice and high standards of value. But still, you want to check that there's a fit between the way you operate and the way the fund, operates.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. So as entrepreneurs, we've been able to gain some knowledge on what we should look out for, or what should guide our decision for going into a relationship with a private equity investor. We have some questions here for you, ma'am. Questions are coming in. Okay, one says here, how can we locate a venture capitalist?
You have, like I said, I know Eco VC, in the tech space, if you go online and you do a Google, you should be able to see what venture capital firms are operating, a Google search, and then you can then find out whether their strategy suits your business. You have different kinds of VCs. Some VCs is just one man, one man in a 2-room office. And he is the one who is deciding where to put $100 million. Others are more established, have a team of managers. Some VCs have industries and spaces that they will not go into. So, it's to look at the entire universe and decide which one will suit you. But there are many VCs out there.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt, for that answer. So You mentioned preference shares earlier on. Could you please shed more light on preference shares and of what benefit is this arrangement to any business?
Yes, prefs, which you call preference shares for short. Earlier I talked about at times doing a combination of equity and quasi-equity, which could be preference shares. So what are preference shares? They're actually a form of equity, but they're also similar to a debt. So you call them hybrid equity. You say they are equity because, like equity, you get paid from profit. If there's no profit, you don't get paid. And obviously when the board declares, dividends. But like a debt, when you are paid, if a company does exceptionally well or it does poorly, it doesn't matter. That coupon rate, that rate you are expecting is what you are expected to be paid. So when you are a cautious investor, you may even decide to say, most of my money, because I'm going to give you money, this entrepreneur, but this industry, I don't know how it's going to be in 5 years' time. So that I'm safe, I'm going to put 80% of what I give to you in prefs and 20% in equity. So that right from the beginning, every year, I'm collecting back some of my money. Because I don't want to wait for 5 years only to find out that an industry that was high has tanked. Because some of my concerns are that in 5 to 6 years, certain things may change. But right now, it's gravy, it's good. So let's go for the ride. But I'll try and harvest upfront as quickly as possible. So we call prefs cautious capital because you want to be cautious. Now, there are benefits to the investor. One is that when you have preference share, like I said, it's quasi-equity. When the company is paying out dividends and trying to decide what its pool is, it must pay me before it pays the people with equity shares, equity stock. I will get everything that my prefs have entitled me to. Then if the remaining in the barrel, which could be large or small, will then be for you to share amongst yourselves as ordinary shareholders. It also ensures that if a company later has problems and is wound up, that I will, as a pref holder, like I said, because I fear that in the long run, this thing may have problems, I kept my capital. So the banks will get their debts. After the banks get their debt, you then have what you call, if there's mezzanine, the mezzanine, fund will get its own. Then I, as a preference shareholder, will get mine before anybody else. So in a way, I protect myself. The other thing, like I said, is that because a fixed coupon rate is predictable, I can plan my cash flow as an investor. I can say, because you must surely give me my money, so long as you make a profit. I can say I'm expecting X amount this year, X amount this year. I can model it up and then decide how I'm going to, use the money. Even when you don't declare a dividend, if my preference shares are cumulative preference shares, the year you don't declare, no problem. The following year when you declare, you must pay me for last year that you didn't give me, and then you give me the one of this year. And that's why you often have covenants as well, if you're a pref holder, that says if a company does not declare dividends for 2 or 3 years, you have a voting, is one of those voting covenants that can be triggered, and you will insist on dividend being declared because they are violating the terms that gird this pref instrument. If I'm not being able to get what I need upfront, and that's why I went for pref, because you don't want to declare dividend, then the covenants I sign and the law will allow me invoke, and force you to declare dividends, invoke a situation where you declare dividends. Now, what are the benefits to the sponsor? Because to the entrepreneur, because prefs are a bit like equity, it's also patient capital. So while I get a yield like a coupon rate, nobody is paying me my principal or my capital yet, So the entrepreneur still has what you call patient long-term capital. It also doesn't carry any voting rights. So for somebody who doesn't want to lose control, other than those special situations where somebody could trigger, a covenant, it's a good way to say, give me pref, I'll give you prefs in exchange for your money and not equity, so that I can maintain the voting arrangements or the voting structure. So to that extent, it preserves ownership structure. Obviously, the disadvantage is there's potential for misalignment. So the company is saying, no, we want to retain earnings, and expand. The pref guy is saying, no, give me my money now. Every year, so, but it's not a large, the delta there is not that wide, in my opinion. So most private equity funds, like I said, often will do the two, particularly when it's growth investment, so that the entrepreneur gets the amount they need, but the capital structure of the organization is not totally distorted. They'll put some money in prefs and others in equity. Ada?
Okay, thank
Hello?
you. Hello, ma'am. Yes. Thank you very much, ma'am. You've really been helpful in giving knowledge on private equity, and I've really learned a lot. And I believe our participants are also have been able to learn a lot from your discussion so far. So we have a question here for you, which reads, please, what PE investors are interested in agricultural value in Nigeria with a focus on snail value chain, which is not very well known?
Can I get that later on when we discuss impact funds?
Yes, ma'am, you can. Thank you very much. Okay, so for our participants joining us from our social media platforms, you can use the comment boxes on the platforms to send in your questions, and we'll get them to our key discussants. And just also to reiterate that our key discussant is Mrs. Uwa Osa-Uber, and she is a well-experienced investment consultant in Nigeria. She is actually the head corporate development at Capital Alliance Nigeria, and she's here to give us insight, to provide more insight on private equity funding. So going ahead, ma'am, from your experience in the industry, would you recommend a financial investor being a major stakeholder in a business? How does this arrangement affect the business in its entirety?
Well, you have two types of investors typically in private equity. You have financial investors, and then you have strategic investors. A financial investor will be a fund, a form of intermediation where you put money out. You want to get the money out, put money in, and you want to harvest money, for a return, with a return. And then you have strategic investors who are not investing who don't see the investment as a financial asset as such. They're investing because that business is complementary to their own business. So when, let's say, ShopRite decided they wanted to buy, there's a supermarket chain in Lagos called Ebano. I don't know if you know it. If ShopRite, for instance, said, we want to grow fast, and this Ebano chain, it seems like they could invest in Ebano and absorb Ebano because they are larger. And you will say ShopRite is a strategic investor. Now, the promoter of Ebano, maybe I don't know him or her, but let's say this person is in their late 60s. He's ready to cash out, just wants to spend the rest of his years enjoying all he has built. For him, it probably doesn't make a difference whether it is private equity fund like Capital Alliance or ShopRite that buys him. The important thing is that he's made his money and he walks away. So the question is, post the investment, which is where you're going, which has more benefits for the business? I think it can go either way. What financial investors, those who see this as a financial asset that they need to turn around and get yield from, they tend to bring in a lot of fiscal discipline right from the beginning. So management, it will be tightened. Management accounts very early on, so that they're able to be proactive. Are we in the right direction? waste, loss of value, they plug it immediately. Things that the promoter didn't mind, because it made my staff happy. A financial investor may say, whether it makes people happy or not, it's costing us too much. We won't do it. So no business class, everybody do premium. I'm not saying that that's the case, so please, just in case you like business class. But those are the kinds of things that, if they don't think it adds value to the business, are the kind of decisions that the financial investor brings. So the business is run with very little fat, even when it's a big business. So if you want to talk about people who know how to clean up a business, the financial investors tend to be better. The strategic investor, some of the bad practices that they even had, they may even introduce it to the new company they've just invested in, And we all know that M&As and integrations are very difficult. So those efficiencies, in fact, when there's a merger and acquisition, as consultants will know, the likelihood of failure, you may say, oh, we'll share certain benefits, certain assets will be jointly, so we'll save costs. At times, it doesn't happen that way. At times, distrust alone destroys the value creation. So I will say this, because of the discipline that a financial investor brings in, it has been said that many strategic investors would often want to buy a business that is being exited by a financial investor. So if a private equity fund, which is a financial investor, goes into a business for 5-6 years, and a strategic investor is looking for a business to absorb, to grow, in scale, if he hears that it's a private equity fund that has been there, the likelihood is that they'll like to go there, because they know that that business has been cleaned out. It has been efficiently managed and it's well positioned to immediately be value accretive, and so that's the advantage that it does bring. Now, in the long run, however, and this is where, if you listen to the US election, when what's his name? When the guy in private equity was, I can't remember his name now, Mike, I've forgotten his name, the guy from Utah, when he was running for presidency. And they said, oh, you run private equity businesses, you created job loss, people lost their jobs, Mitt Romney, people lost their jobs and, whatnot. You guys are cold, you are heartless, and that's why financial investors get some bad flack, but it's never so. It depends on what you're looking at. If a business is bloated, truly a financial investor will say, you don't need 30 sales managers. Increase their hours from 5 to 7 hours. It's not too much. And then do away with probably 10 so that the cost will go down. And those 10, obviously, it is loss of income to them. And that's the social issue that the business may face. So what they'll try and do is mitigate that with good benefits and good payoffs, or even hire them in the value chain as suppliers, just to ensure that the flack is not too negative. So because the aim is to sweat an asset, the decisions tend to be very, very calculated. And some people feel that this takes away from the luster of the investor, but it depends on what, are you after growth in terms of GDP? Because any business that has a lot of fat and is not being optimally managed is just a question of time. It's just a question of time before it goes under. So when you're looking at productivity and growth and you're prepared to, align with that, you may say, listen, the financial investor helps. When you're looking at other things, softer things, then at times there's a bit of an issue. The other thing which I would agree with, which at times may be a problem, is the original vision the founder had for the business would have all kinds of mission-oriented, elements, maybe to make an impact on the community, and various things that they set up this business for, which they were doing. A financial investor may come and say, what nonsense, how does that help me, and stop some of those things. And you then begin to look at cost and benefits. Maybe the goodwill that those things generated is much more than a few extra million in the bank account. So it's give or take. And that's why I say, when you are choosing the investor, what is the culture? What is their orientation? What are their values? That will tell you whether this is the right person for me or not.
Thank you very much, ma'am. This further buttresses what you said earlier about the PE investors bringing in that professionalism into a business. And, you mentioned that if you want to, if it's just all about the money, you go for the debt financing. But if you want So we know the economy does not work. When you mention economy, there's no way you can mention an economy without involving the government. Equity, financiers in the country. If yes, in what way do you think the government can come in to facilitate?
Okay, I think the government can help in two ways. One is just complying with best practice. It is not a regulated industry, like I said. You don't have like NCC that regulates the telecom sector or CBN the banking sector. When I give you money as a private company, it is between me and you. But obviously, you do have broad regulations. As a private equity fund investing in a portfolio company, it's important that we are good corporate citizens and we embrace all of this. But because you don't have an active regulator breathing down your neck, I referred to it earlier and I won't belabor it now, is to say that the industry has very strict protocols, which are probably even more heavy-handed than that of a government regulator in some instances. So with or without having a regulator overseeing you, there's a lot of discipline within this space. Your reputation is gold in this particular sector. So your reputation for productivity, for profitability, for being a good corporate citizen are all things that you guard very jealously. So I think to that extent, broad compliance. The other thing is just enabling businesses thrive. If I invest in a company expecting returns and the Naira is devalued 100%, as was the case in 2015, 2016, suddenly it's twice as difficult for me to make the target return that I had originally targeted because the money was taken from people gave me in dollars. So even if I make it in Naira, I convert it to dollars, it will be half of the amount. So it goes back to the enabling environment, creating enabling environments where, these businesses can thrive through policy regulation and the legislation. But I really want to touch on, I know we have 2 more minutes. I want to really touch on impact investing because of the person who asked a question on agriculture. If you don't mind, Ada, let me just quickly go there. Impact investing is a field of investing. So let's look at agri. If I want to make 3 times money in agri, other than if I invest in some biotech area, some real sophisticated area, maybe with some app or something that can tell me the soil temperature. And, this app is a technology tool, the company that is making it, will sell it across Africa and make millions. If it's a normal maize, starch, cows, piglets, it's very difficult to provide bullish returns from such investments. And a field of funds, new funds have now arisen that are called impact funds. And these impact funds say, okay, commercial returns may not be high as it would with the traditional fund, but we are after the triple bottom line. We are after the social performance. Is this thing creating jobs? Is it feeding people? We're after environmental impact. So renewable energy may not be very attractive to an oil company that is pumping out oil, but maybe there's some fund for somebody who wants to do renewable lamps and renewable torchlights and renewable TV because it's environmentally friendly. The returns may not be high, solar, but guess what? We will put money there. But at the same time, guess what? We are not in this for loss. We also will make profit. But our driving consideration is not just commercial, it's the triple bottom line. And today there are impact funds available that fund such, ventures. I will quickly say that the same strictures that are applied to P will apply. So you either have, VC or the P type mature business, they will expect well-run organizations. Your books must be good, and all of those things, so they are not dealing with people they will consider, charlatans or people who are not responsible. In fact, this is called responsible investing. So to that extent, I can't go through everything here, but let me quickly say this. So impact funds will say our aim is to do good as well as do well. We want to do well, but at the same time, we want to make an impact while doing well. And for that reason, they complement, because a lot of these spaces are spaces that philanthropists may have been in, or the government. So you have all these subsidized funds that the CBN or the Development Bank or Bank of Industry. Bank of Industry, by the way, is an impact investor, as the Development Bank is. These are banks who don't want to lose the money, but their rate of return is not quite high. So they complement the efforts of government and a few philanthropists who may be in that kind of space, like education. You have philanthropists who set up schools and all of that, but it's not enough. So the funds complement that. They help, therefore, boost SME growth. So somebody in the agri space who says, I want to grow snails, and has shown proof of concept, has shown that they can make a profit, has shown that, there's real scale room for growth if they're able to get funding. Clearly impact funds will look at you very closely. I remember a farmer in the north who was growing cows and all of that. And because of the milk for yogurts and how popular it was, I know they got, some funding for their products. And also what these impact funds do is, where before the government will give money to agencies, at times the agencies don't even do anything. By moving such funds, and if I look at the Nigerian Sovereign, Wealth Fund, in some ways it has carve-out funds that are impact. There are areas the government has said, put in this area, put in that area, because we want you to make an impact. So, but the NSIA will not be the one, Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund, NSW will not be the one, NSWF will not be the one to give you the money. At times they give it to funds that are impact funds. And those funds will take that money, put it in commercially viable ventures that are run by tested and well-screened entrepreneurs, and ensure that a business that was running maybe in a suboptimal manner, they will pump best practice into that business. So you find a school that gets impact funding, its standards automatically go up. Just as the P fund will drive value creation and value addition, the impact fund will also ensure that they drive value creation and value addition. So they also can exit for some commercial return at the end of the day. Now, there are a few impact funds in Nigeria. And Sahel Capital, I think the 8th on the list, I know, deals with agriculture. Another one that deals with agriculture is Palladium. So you have some impact funds that focus on agriculture. So I think that answers that, and it is 3:30. So I think we've covered our mandate, Ada.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you so much. One major thing I learned from impact investment is that what makes it unique is that you're doing well and also doing good at the same time. So thank you very much, ma'am. Right now, we're going to launch a webinar evaluation, and please would want you to give us your feedback. And while we do that, ma'am, we have a question here which reads, is there an association for the private equity firms in Nigeria?
No.
Okay.
Probably not. No. That's wrong. You have PEFCA. PEFCA is the Private Equity Venture and Venture Capital Association of Nigeria.
Okay.
So there's PEFCA and there's AFCA. AFCA is the African Venture Capital Association for Africa. Okay. So yeah, but you have those that are also global. You have MPR. MPR is very strong in the West. So I take that back. What made me laugh and I was more focused on was impact investment. So you have two impact investment associations as well. You have the Impact Investing Foundation of Nigeria, which I have on the screen, and you have the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance, and these are associations that provide an ecosystem for impact investors. But like I said, you have PEFCA and AFCA. with regard to what you call the traditional PE space.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's really been a time of intensive learning. I've learned so much. And I believe that the participants here have also learned so much on private equity. So we'll no longer be so scared. At least we have quite a substantial knowledge on what it's all about, so we can confidently go out there and seek private equity funding for our businesses. Thank you so much for the enlightenment, ma'am. So
Thank you.
while we round up for today, ma'am, would you have any final words to our participants? Any final words?
I think if I have, I mean, funding is always a challenge, but what I'll say is think big. Once you can think big, know that there are partners out there, if your vision is attractive to them, that can help you carry that vision to fruition. You know, people say that capital is not the problem. At times it's ideas, or at times it is the things that support the growth of businesses, like the willingness of a promoter of a business to do the right thing, to invest in capacity building. And I honestly think so. There's immense capital available, even with COVID and whatnot. In fact, right now with COVID, there's a lot of capital that is going into technology. You know, as we know, education, and how do we transition from face-to-face to technology platforms? You have migrants who are going to Europe, and you know, the other day, migrant camp caught fire. European countries today are investing in impact funds, and they're saying, please take those funds to Africa so that their people can stop migrating and crossing the, you know, Atlantic and the Sahara Desert, you know, so that they can stay in their countries. So there's funding. The thing is, what do you need the funding for? Are you clear as to what you want to achieve? And have you worked to package your proposition in a manner that makes it viable to be funded?
Thank you very much, ma'am. So thank you, key discussant, Mrs. Uwa Osaogwe, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. We believe that our participants have taken away key learnings from this discussion today. And many thanks to you, our esteemed participants, for joining us and making the discussion quite interactive. Just to let you know that the recording of this webinar and our previous webinars will be on our social media platforms. So our social media platforms, I've put up the sites on the screen there. You can get those the videos from Facebook and also on YouTube. And you can refer to them to gain more knowledge on what you may have missed while the discussion was going on. And this is also to remind you that our webinar is a monthly event which holds every third Tuesday, and we encourage you to join us next month. So on behalf of the management and the staff of Wider Perspectives Limited, would like to say thank you so much for joining us on this webinar today, and we look forward to welcoming you next month. Thank you, and my name is Adobe Ume, and my co-host Oyekachi Udensi. We are saying thank you so much for your time, and see you next month.